So I feel like much of my speech has been stolen because I feel like even Tyler kind of mentioned I was going to talk about like how walking in the woods is nice and kind of silent pondering life, and my mom kind of just told my story, but I was going to kind of talk about how PLC, she kind of talked about my history, and I'm going to kind of talk about how PLC has inspired me to kind of move forward. So PLC really has kind of thoroughly changed my life because I did used to hate school. My mom said that, I wanted to go back. I didn't want to go back at all. So because when you're in middle school or high school, school is practically your entire life. You have a fixed schedule for 6 or 7 hours a day. And then even when you get home, you have hours worth of homework after that. And then plus, you want to have enough extracurriculars, get enough sleep, have a social life. So it really is difficult, and kind of balancing all of that seemed insane. But when I got to PLC, everything changed. And I remember on my first day of PLC, I remember thinking how nice it was to kind of come to a school without any type of anxiety. So, and also, when I came to PLC, I got to explore so many different things. It was the first time I was asked, what do you want to learn? And so I kind of grabbed at all the opportunities that I could right away. And there were so many classes that I took. I took conversational German. I sat in on some science seminar classes, modern U.S. history, but there definitely were a couple of classes that just really kind of pioneered my interests and that really changed me. So one of those that my mom mentioned was Joel's evolution class. And it really kind of re-sparked my love for science, because kind of after public education, I went on home instruction for a while with biology. I had to end up dropping physics when I was in public school, just because it just really wasn't working. And actually, I later found out my friend had overheard my old physics teacher from Westfield High School talking to some other teachers about how there was one student who just wasn't grasping it, and I found out later on that he actually ended up changing some of the way he taught because of my failing, kind of. But yeah, so my kind of love for science has kind of just fallen, but Joel's evolution class really kind of re-sparked that. So I did end up going to visit Peter and Rosemary Grant, which they are outstanding evolutionary biologists, kind of a big name in the science world. And also I exchanged some emails with a professor who's featured in one of the documentaries that we watched in the class about a question that I had on a certain species of newt. And he sent me a PDF of one of his research papers, which was really interesting. And reading that, and also reading up from other readings from that class, kind of got me into reading nonfiction. And the book that Joel based the class off of, Why Evolution is True by Jerry Coyne, was the first nonfiction book that I read cover to cover, and it's one of my favorite books. And now so many of the books that I love are nonfiction. So that really kind of changed a lot of things for me. And another class that really changed me at PLC is the Do Something class. So last year it was taught by Allison, and this year it's taught by Jeanette. I don't see her now, but yeah. And it's kind of do something is we learn about today's issues in the world and then see what we can do about it. So taking action in our communities. And I came into the class last year hoping to discuss social issues. And at the time we were doing a unit on the environment and sustainability. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. But then I just got totally immersed in it. The first day that I was at the class, we were watching the series of videos called The Story of Stuff, which was talking about the environmental and economic impacts of productions of things. And the first one that we watched was the story of plastic water bottles. And since that day, I haven't bought a plastic water bottle. And I became so interested in environmental studies. And I ended up going to Ecuador with a program called Sustainable Summer. And the program focused on sustainable development and environmental issues in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And it was just an incredible experience. I got to study so many incredible things. And when the next year rolled around, fall of this past year, I started 2 new classes at PLC. I started taking them, an environmental science class and an environmental sustainability class. So slightly different, but the environmental science class, sadly the volunteer who taught that, his schedule changed. But I did get a lot from the few weeks or months, I suppose, that we met. And the environmental sustainability class has actually been a huge success. We're working on an environmental sustainability action plan with the church that we're located at, All Saints Church. So we're working with them to have their church be more sustainable. And it's been such an incredible experience. I also took a climate change policy class with the New York Times education program. So that class was actually taught by the New York Times environmental blog editor, Andrew Revkin. So, and that class was actually happening at the same time as the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP21. So we actually got to Skype with some policymakers who were at the conference in Paris. Yeah. So now, all these kind of small, well, and not so small experiences kind of shaped me, and I want to study environmental science, sustainable development, and international relations when I attend college. So it's kind of crazy to think that if I didn't attend that PLC Do Something class, I never really would have formulated these interests and these passions. So despite all these classes, I also wanted to become involved in my community. So I reached out to some organizations about volunteering and such, and one of those was this organization called Greening Forward. I initially just emailed them asking, hey, they had this conference coming up next month, and I just emailed them asking if they needed any volunteers to help them with that, because it's a youth-run environmental organization. So I had a phone interview with them, and they said, great, we'll contact you in March when we have more information about the conference. In February, they contacted me and said, hey, our social media manager just resigned kind of abruptly. Would you like the job? So now I'm the social media strategist for a youth-run environmental organization called Greening Forward, which is an incredible title to have on a resume at just 17, 18 years old. And actually, the founder of that organization, he actually started the organization when he was just 12 years old, and now he's 20. So it's an incredible organization. So I manage the Twitter account, so I tweet about 13 times a day. And I reached out to around 70 or 80 educational organizations and schools for their upcoming International Young Environmentalists Youth Summit. Which is just awesome. Yeah. So also, PLC has given me the time to explore so many things, not just at PLC, but outside of PLC. So I know some of you got tickets to this event with the app Eventbrite, and I have used that app so much. It makes it so easy to find free events, lectures, and such. And so I've just kind of been all over with that. Some of the events that I've been to with that are, I went to an event about preserving indigenous farming knowledge at Columbia University. I got to visit the Lowline Lab, so many of you know the Highline Park. They're kind of working on a sister project to that park called the Lowline, so it's set to be New York's first underground park. So I got to go to an event about that. And also just other conferences and such, some with PLC, some with Greening Forward. Last year I got to go to the AERO conference, the Alternative Education Resource Organization conference, and it was an incredible experience. I got to connect with so many organizations, learn about them, and also hear some incredible speakers. Sugata Mitra, who he had an award-winning TED Talk about kind of his endeavors in education. So I got to see that. Also, going to conferences with Greening Forward, I got to go to multiple urban agriculture conferences. So PLC, the lenient schedule, especially having Wednesdays off, is very helpful for that. But these are just kind of my academic my academic achievements and such. And I've done so much with PLC, and I actually have time to play and such, which, it's, a lot of people don't think that, 17, 18-year-olds, really need to play. But actually, Peter Gray, there's actually a copy of the book downstairs, just on the table with the business cards, pamphlets, and such about PLC, BLC, about his book, Free to Learn, which is all about how important play is in education. And I just find that so relatable, because we spend so much time playing at PLC, whether we're on the playground playing ground stop, or we're just rolling around on the floor, or if we're just chilling out with a puzzle. It really is important. And also just taking time in nature, walking around in the woods, and exploring my new interests as well. There are so many kind of small things, like a photography class was recently started at PLC by a former member who's here, Bobby, which I've really enjoyed. I've also participated in some online classes, one about the food system in America. Also, I've had more time in general to read and watch documentaries. I've seen so many documentaries in the past year. And just enjoying life in general. So basically, I do a lot of cool stuff, and I never would have been able to pursue any of these things without PLC. And so I'll be attending Hampshire College next year, which will give me a lot of kind of academic freedom. They encourage their students to kind of incorporate all their interests. They don't do traditional majors and minors. So it will be an environment similar to PLC, but I will definitely miss having the PLC environment, because, it has given me a supportive, resourceful, and overall fun environment to pursue my education. So, thank you.